Greetings and salutations. I am an alcoholic. My name is Bill. We are here today with DC
I don't see
in the
DC.
house, plus the rest of you. So it's a big month for us here at Design for Living. This is the celebration of our 1 year anniversary month. After careful review, I think this is only our 51st week, which is perfect because 2 weeks from today, what we have is a holiday, which is also, there's something going on in Canada. I don't think they work anyhow ever, but they won't work that day. So we're all going to be here to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of this meeting. And our original founder, Nadia, will be taking that time off so she can be here too. And Rob, why don't you just really say quickly what the compendium is, right quick, so I don't botch it on the tape.
The compendium is a bunch of people that have a love for the big book. And we have meetings Monday to Friday. We have 2 daytime meetings, which is on Monday at 12 and Friday at 12 with Rach. And then we have on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the incredible Paige. On Tuesday night, we have Kevin O. On Wednesdays, we have the 2 Davids. And on Thursday, Howard E. and Steve W. will be doing a page by page workshop. So come on out if you can. And on Friday night is the Lunacy Commission with our own Paige and Terry. Pew pew. There you go, Bill.
I thank you kindly. And all the people that helped throughout the year. Chrissy's here, DC is here, Gigi filled in once. I may have even taken it once by myself, but I was instantly vetoed. That's why we have all the help, because we need a lot of help. And I was thinking, of the people that Rob named, and this is such a big thing, started by our good friend Steve W. Brilliant. He tries to get as many of these going because the integrity of the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, the preservation of the literature is critical. Because if not, what happens is in 2,000 years, either Bill W. or me will be being crucified for all the alcoholics sacrificed therein because someone got a hold of a story, didn't get the facts properly, and did what alcoholics and all human beings do. They tend to embellish just a little. And by the time the story reaches 2,000 years later, Alcoholics Anonymous might be extinct. It might be something else. So we've got to preserve the integrity. I also noticed that of the people that Rob named, there are some people on that platform that know what Dr. Bob had for breakfast 2 days before he gave his farewell speech. I am not that guy, but I'll tell you what, I love the intricacies of the 12 steps and the instructions. That may be my forte. So we all have a different platform. It's kind of like we're the body of AA. Some know the history real well. Some keep charts and graphs, and I get into the instructions for the steps because that's where the magic is for me. So we are going to start today on the instructions for step 11. Last week, I think we spent most of the meeting on step 10. And I was reminded when I fell in love with the sound of my own voice last week that we agreed to stop a little early so that you guys could share. And we still ended up staying here for 3 hours. You can mute that on the tape, Rob, because they know that's not true. And anyhow, we are on page 85, and we're going to talk once again about that transitionary period, that paragraph between steps 10 and 11. And actually, there's a whole lot more than that when I read it, because I'm going to go back and read 2 paragraphs that I wouldn't have considered both transitionary. I would have considered them instructional, but they are not. The instructions for step 10, which we read, are really just a paragraph found on page 84. Because I was so familiar with studying 84 through 88, I kind of kept reading on, and they weren't really the instructions. They were warnings and promises and so on and so forth, with the exception of one in between, which says every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. So let's cover that. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. We get that vision when we enter the world of the spirit. We talked about that last week. That was very Very powerful observation. Where am I getting the vision? And how do I have the power to carry it out? Growing in understanding and effectiveness. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. And we say that not mine in tongue in cheek, it's in parentheses because I don't think God ever considers doing our will over his, but they humor us and let us think we're giving him permission to do what he was already going to do. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. Do you see? It looks like you want to say something before we get into the instructions. Come on.
Thanks, Bill. You know, it's funny. I had this revelation yesterday. You know, part of my daily prayer and meditation includes, you know, asking God to place me in the position of those and a path of those I can help, right? To be able to carry the vision of God's will into my life. But I had this moment when I realized, like, my job is to align myself with God's will. I don't get to decide what showing up for other people looks like or doesn't look like, right? Like, that's the part of this where we're aligning ourselves with God's will, is being able to discern the difference. You know, where am I trying to enforce my will versus where am I aligning myself with my will? So I think the path of least resistance, right, is that intuitive experience that comes when we invite God to be a part of this whole experience, you know, aligning ourselves with God's, not forcing, not being dissatisfied when things aren't going our way. If I'm in a state of dissatisfaction, I'm certainly sitting in my will. When I'm in a place of peace and ease and things are flowing and are comfortable, that's how I know it's God's will for me. That's how I know that I'm aligned. That's all I wanted to say, Bill.
Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from him, capital H, who has all knowledge and power. I believe they're referring to God. Now, where have we received much of this inspiration, strength, and direction? All throughout this process. It tells us before we even utter the second step prayer, we feel a new power, peace, and happiness flow into us. It tells us when we share our fifth step with someone else, we thank God from the bottom of our heart. We may have had beliefs, but now we begin to have an experience. We know that we're walking on the broad highway hand, all this good stuff. They've been talking about this the whole way. They're talking about receiving intuition when I'm going to make amends. What I need to share, who I need to share with, who I need to talk to, and who I need to leave alone. This is good stuff. If we have carefully followed directions, remember at the beginning of the book, the first italicized paragraph says to show other alcoholics precisely how the alcoholics who wrote this book recovered is the main purpose of this book. So precise means we've carefully followed directions. We might have not done it precisely, but we did it to the best of our ability at the time. We have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. If it's vital, it's just sustaining to life, like victuals or food. That's what we need to sustain ourselves. You go a week or so without food, you might not make it to the third week. You have anything to say about that, DC?
You know,
Not the food thing, that paragraph, you know.
This paragraph includes what I believe is one of the most powerful words in the big book, and that's if. If we have carefully followed direction. See, it tells me, like, it gives me a condition, if I'm willing to engage in this part, here's what the reward, the consequence, whatever it is going to be, right? So if we've carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. That's a promise. You know, if we're willing to do these things, if we're willing to do those things, we will feel the presence of God within us.
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. So, and that's real important because the spirit has been there the whole time. We talked about it. What I believe we have is an umbilical cord that's invisible and one of spirit that connects to the divine deep within all of us. We're not independent. We're not like, doesn't come with batteries like we're tying into the web. I think that we're connected to this power. We begin to sense the flow of his spirit. We begin to sense this God consciousness. Now we become aware. We're starting to awaken. We entered the world of the spirit at step 10. The step 12 description that we read in most meetings, when we read the 12 steps or see them up on the window shade, is a description of a previous action because it says having had. That means it's taken place before we get to step 12. I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, it talks about step 10, entering the world of spirit, neutrality, all that good stuff, which we spent 40 minutes on last week talking about. So we're starting to wake up. We're in a different realm and we're aware of that realm. But that's only the beginning. We've not even scratched the surface yet. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further. And we talked about further being different than farther. Farther means I'm going more miles on the trip. Further means I'm heading closer towards the heavens. One is in length, distance in that respect. The other is in a different realm or a different plane. And that means more action, which means I'm responsible for getting there. If I want to get on the rocket ship, I got to put the fuel in it, but I'm going to go. Step 11, suggest. And incidentally, it says suggest so we know that when we read the list of steps at the meeting, they're suggesting they're not the instructions. In matter of fact, I'm going to leave it till we get there, but this is exciting because I used to think prayer and meditation was just what most of us did. Prayer is talking to God. Meditation is listening to God. That very well may be the definition today, but I don't believe it was what they were talking about 85 years ago. So we're going to find out. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. That's if you believe there's better men than we alcoholics. Come on, guys. There ain't no one better than us. We know that. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions. Remember, we had a definite 4-step platform. We were definite as this example. When they say definite, pay attention because they're going to be definite. When we retire at night. So we're starting our 11th step at the end of the day. If you recall, we did a 5th step sometime throughout this very first day, at the very latest, the day before. I shared with someone my whole life story. I went home. I spent an hour alone with this power, reviewing some things, asking some questions, making sure dishonesty didn't sneak in there. If I can answer those questions to my satisfaction, we're going to move on and look at step 6 and 7. Am I entirely ready for God to remove what he and I agree are objectionable in my life that's interfering, that's blocking me from everything? Of course I am, because I just told someone how I single-handedly destroyed my life. I humbly, and if I'm not, if there's something I want to hang on to because I still think it's an asset or benefits me, I ask him to help me to be willing. I go to him now and I say, my creator, please, all of me, you got it all. Total surrender. And then I go out to repair the damage done. Well, hell, my wife might come home if I was lucky enough to have one at the time, and I did it one time. She might come home after my hour alone talking to God after I said the 7-step prayer. And I may sit down with her at that moment and frankly analyze the past. I may wait and I might just say we need to talk, but I begin this process. I'm on step 10 immediately because the book says, as we cleaned up the past. That means while in this respect. AS and WHILE mean the same thing at this time. Is that your understanding of that, DC? As we cleaned up the past, while we cleaned up the past?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there, Bill. 100%. It's as we clean it up, as we go through it, right? Keeping that real time. That's what we get out of step 10. You know what I mean? And as we move into step 11, what you're about to dive into in this paragraph, this becomes the catch-all for where we might have fallen short on our 10th step throughout the day. Go ahead, Bill.
Beautiful. So, and that's exactly right. This we've already established, I think, that this serves at the very least a threefold purpose. Number one, did I miss anything? Did I not catch anything in the 10th step today? Number two, did I catch a lot in the 10th step today? As a matter of fact, did I catch more in the 10th step trap today than I did on last Tuesday. If my days are progressively getting more amends and more need to do the 10th step, amend, talk to someone immediately and then resolutely for someone we can help, how is self creeping in and taking me in the wrong direction? Just for the record, and once I say it today, I'll never be able to deny it. I was at odds, or at least I thought I was yesterday with some people. So you know that one of my strong suits is I need to let them know what they're doing wrong. And then I got to find them and make amends for what I did wrong. Why can't I just shut my mouth? I called David G today. Self is a funny thing. If you're not doing what I think you ought to be doing, what part of myself is threatened? At the very least, I'm playing God because I'm saying there's something that you're doing that I don't approve of. That's my biggest defect of character, judgment, knowing that you guys are making some stuff up. And I demand the truth. And guess what? Maybe I'm right. Maybe. I've been right on one occasion. And even if I am, why is it so important that I demand that you tell the truth? Maybe you're not capable of telling the truth. Maybe I'm not capable of the perception that I think I have. Either way, what happens is I get a knot in my gut. I open my big mouth to get relief, and the knot gets greater till I say, why did you just not shut up? Take care of it. Ask God to remove it. You're back in the bondage of self. This is important. Step 10 is throughout the day. Step 11 is at the end of the day, and step 11 is at the beginning of the day. This is critical. This is our daily reprieve, guys. Why don't you read a paragraph, DC?
All right. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? I'm going to pause right there really quickly. If you remember, we go back 2 pages on page 84, and in the directions in step 10, it says continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. So this nightly inventory that's part of step 11 comes in and calls that out right away, right? Were we resentful, dishonest, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? I'll tell you what, there's not a day that I can't answer yes to one of those. Right? If I'm being truly, truly deep and thorough when I'm thinking about these questions, was I resentful? Did anybody piss me off? Was I selfish? Right? Selfishness comes in so many different forms. Self-centeredness, self-seeking, like you name it. Absolutely. Was I dishonest? That's the only part that sometimes I can get away with saying no. But when I think about it, here's a form of dishonesty that I hadn't considered until somebody brought to my attention. If I'm supposed to be working and I'm spending time walking the dog, checking the mail, cleaning my house, I'm stealing company time, right? I'm using that time for personal issues. Is that honest? Absolutely not. And was I afraid? Like, I'm a fear-centered alcoholic. All my decisions are made on fear. I'm afraid of losing what I have. I'm afraid of not getting something I want. I'm afraid of what you think of me. I'm like, you know what I mean? It's just this constant narrative. So we have an opportunity to really get honest and really see where our 10 step was not necessarily in shape. And then when we see that, we can ask ourselves, do we owe an apology? That's the next question. Do we owe an apology? Did we step on the toes of our fellows? Even if they retaliated, do we owe them an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? I can tell you how many times I get stuck in my own head. And I create all these narratives and I create these stories. And I think that I have people figured out. I'm predicting outcomes. I'm creating this false narrative in my head, right? But usually if I can call another person and share with them, they're like, you're crazy. Fear is based on something that hasn't materialized yet. Why would you think that person thinks that? That probably wasn't the situation. And so I have an opportunity to discuss these things with other people, which again goes back to the instructions in step 10, right? We discuss them with another person at once. Get a different perspective, to right size our fears, to right size our ego, all those things. Were we kind and loving towards all, every single one, including myself? Was I, because I'm included in all, right? And a lot of times I'm not very kind to myself. What could we have done better? And this is a question that we invite God to give us the answer to, right? When we look back at that, we take a look at what our day looked like, and we ask God, what could I have done better? How can I do better tomorrow? See, I don't get answers to the questions I don't ask. I've raised my daughter with this theory that if you don't ask, the answer is always no, right? And so this is a question where we invite God in to be a part of the situation and a part of the solution. What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time? Usually, Yes, if you think about it, I'm wrapped up in my thoughts, my experiences, my perceptions, my fears. I'm wrapped up in that. Even in the moments when I'm helping other people, I'm thinking like, are they receiving this? Did they hear me? That wasn't the look I wanted when I said what I want. You know what I mean? Like, is this constantly, am I thinking of myself most of the time? Yeah. Or was I thinking what I could do for others and what I could pack into the stream of life? I hope that every day I have an opportunity where I can be of service to others. I hope that every day presents me with an opportunity to be placed in the path of another person I can help in and out of the rooms, right? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, right? We don't get hung up on the debit side of the ledger of our day. We don't get hung up in all the ways that we fell short, that we failed, that we said that thing we shouldn't have said. We don't sit in morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask for God's forgiveness and inquire. Again, there's that, what could we have done better? We inquire what corrective measures we should be taking. We invite God to help us see the truth, not my truth, the truth. Just like the set aside prayers tells us, right? Help me set aside everything I think I know. Help me see the truth. And that's where that part comes in. Come on, Bill.
Things. Remember, I think it was last week we talked about it. The word constructively means with a benefit. But more importantly, yesterday when we were doing a different book study, we're in the fourth step and it says we reviewed our fears thoroughly. And I looked up the word review and, initially just from on its face, means again, and view means to look at, but it means much more than that. So listen to this definition: a formal assessment or examination of something with the possibility or intention of instituting change if necessary. So when I constructively review my day, it's not just to sit there and say, okay, it was a crap show today. I'll try better tomorrow. I'm going to say, what was happening? What produced that crap show? Why was it so important that I demanded to be heard in that area? Why did I have to say that to them? What was driving me? Because that's another thing that's going to separate me or block me from God. And the reality is when you're in the spirit, when you're in the world of the spirit, you know it. There's nothing like it. You become a channel and you know what the problem is. It says it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action. And what that means is I quit taking inventory because I'm feeling pretty good about me and God. And all of a sudden the idiots start to show up, but it doesn't look like idiots. It looks like they knew I wanted that parking spot and I was sitting there nicely and waiting. Why did they sneak in there? Okay, thy will be done. And I go to the next one and they do it again. By the time I get to the checkout aisle and I've got 10 items or less and you've got 12 and I'm counting them, I'm starting to slip away from that realm of the spirit. And I'm back in this realm where I've always been. The problem is I've been here so long, it feels comfortable until it doesn't feel comfortable. And I don't like the discomfort. I don't know why. I choose those stupid battles in my head which separate me from that grace when things are going so wonderful. I don't know if it's because I'm human, I'm an alcoholic, or as most of you know in this platform, or I'm an idiot. Some guy said, you don't know much, Bill Swan, and you can prove it. Did you want to say something, DC? I see your hands on the trigger. Okay, good. Here we go. Yeah, it's a continuation of 4 through 9. It really is. It really is just asking, did we discuss it? Did we keep something to ourselves? Step 10 is 4 through 9, and 11 is just kind of keep it moving, right? Watch at the end of the day. Did we omit anything? Am I getting worse? Am I heading in the wrong direction? On awakening. See the instructions for step 11, right? We're right there. All those questions that we ask ourselves, and then it tells us another instruction is don't drift into worry or morbid reflection. Don't beat yourself up too bad because we're great at that. That's another form of false pride because then I become the worst. You're doing so good reading, DC. Come on.
All right. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives, right? Not selfishness, not dishonesty, not self-pity, but the motives, the things that drive the behaviors. So we're being encouraged to invite God to actually get to the root of it, right? The causes and conditions. Please divorce my thinking from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. Let me show up for other people with a pure and good intentioned heart. Because I can show up and I can show up in this, in like, it can seem real kind, like I'm being generous, right? All these things. But what's driving the behavior behind that? So I invite God to help me start it right. Come on, Bill.
Just want to say that the third instructional line, I believe, is actually the first instruction. What I always thought was I wake up, I think about the day, consider my plans, and then I ask God to direct my thinking. I think the way I'm reading it now is I ask God to direct my thinking, to divorce me from these things, and then I consider my plans for the day and look at the 24 hours ahead, because it says, guess what? My thinking will be cleared of wrong motives when my thought life is placed on a higher plane. If I'm asking God to take me to the higher plane before I even begin thinking, then I can rest assured that I'm probably not going to have so many problems. And even if I'm due, he's going to show up with an answer, because that's what it tells us. So I always, like I said, I read that as the third sentence, meaning ABC. And I think what it is CAB.
All right. Under these conditions, right? We've invited God to be a part of the solution. We've invited God to help direct our thinking. We've invited God to help divorce our thinking from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives, right? Under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. And Bill just touched on that, right? And again, like if I can show up for other people, if I can show up in this world and my motives are pure, my motives are kind, my motives are thoughtful, I'm here to be of service, I'm here to help and not hurt, right? Like that's one of the things that, and it might have been Bill that I've heard say this, like, God, if I can't be helpful today, let me not hurt, something like that. I heard somebody say something like that. You know what I mean? Because sometimes I wake up a little crunchy. I've already decided, here are the obstacles that I'm going to face today. Here are the challenges that I'm going to face today. God, you got to help me, right? Direct my thinking. Help clear my motives. Let me show up in your pure love and spirit in all my interactions today. And if I can do that, our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane. I can show up the way that I'm supposed to show up. I can show up and help take care of God's kids the way that God would take care of his own kids. Come on in, Bill.
That was intuitive. See, she knew I was coming up with my hand before I got it there. So it's interesting. It tells us in step 3, problem centers in our mind. We need to have a psychic change. Well, not step 3 in the previous chapter. We're talking about self-centeredness leading up to step 3. So the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. We're driven by the obsession. And here all of a sudden, guess what it tells us? Under these conditions, the condition is this: I'm asking God into my mind to direct my thinking, divorcing me from certain things that block me from him. Under these conditions, I can employ my mind. My mind now works for me. I don't work for it. It's not driving me anymore. It's its proper function. God gave us brains to use. He made our brains. We employ our brains. Our thinking now is beneficial to us as opposed to detrimental. And we talked about this last week. I'm sure we went over this step last week, but it's okay. We love step 11. What we find here is if someone's sitting in a meeting and say, I've been thinking, they make that statement. A lot of us laugh thinking that's a bad idea. First thought wrong. Guess what this is telling us? Let's not be so quick to minimize the power of God after we've tried this for a while, because our thought life is on a much higher plane. If I know that someone has taken the steps and had an awakening of the spirit and they say, I've been thinking, I don't laugh at them. I sit real close and hear what they got to say, because it might be something that God has on their tongue for me to hear that I didn't hear myself. This is critical. Remember, we're intelligent agents, ever advancing spearheads of all that good stuff that we read about in chapter 4. The stuff that we minimize and put down and run around and beat ourselves up all the time and tell ourselves how worthless we are and nobody, all that crap. That's not true. We're cutting down God's creative handiwork when we do that. So our thought life will be placed. And when you place something, that means something else is doing it, right? If I place something on the table, it means it wasn't on the table and I brought it over and set it there. So how is my thought life being placed? Because I've asked God to come in and do something. Maybe he's making the placement or the replacement. I'm good.
You want us to keep going?
Yeah. Don't we? Did you
Yeah,
want to say something?
No, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to keep reading or if you wanted to.
Yeah, I
jump in.
said I'm done. I'm sorry. Yeah,
All right.
please.
All right. In thinking about our day, we may face indecision. I face indecision every single day. Do I respond? Do I not respond? Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I let this person in? What if I do this, right? This indecision that comes, and that's probably one of the biggest things that eats up a lot of my mental capacity throughout my day. So in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here, we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. I mean, all throughout what we've read so far, it's this invitation for God to come in and help start our day, to help direct us throughout the day. When I don't know what to do, I ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or a decision. Then here's what it says. We relax and take it easy, right? I don't sit there and grovel and like, oh God, you got to tell me what to do, and then sit with my fist clenched and wait for the answers. We don't struggle. We're often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. So sometimes it's that opening that conversation, right? Opening, like asking God, what do I do? Where do I go? And then sometimes I just need to go in my kitchen and do some dishes. And all of a sudden, as I'm doing dishes, I have this intuitive thought that comes into my head, this intuitive guidance or this direction that comes to me, right? But I'm impatient. I get real impatient. I'm like, what do I do? I need the answers now, and I need the answers that I want. But it tells us right here, we relax and take it easy. We do not struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. You know what I mean? And that reminds me of something that for those of you who know Donna J always says, faith is the result of the results. After I've tried this for a while, and once I realize that when I invite God to be a part of the situation or the solution, and it happens, I start to feel a little bit more comfortable, a little more confident that I can let go of this. I can turn things over to God, and God will bring me an answer. But sometimes I just got to go and keep moving throughout my day, and the answers will come when and how they're ready to be delivered.
Statement, please. If
What's
I
that?
may.
Yeah,
If I
please.
may, I want to interject something because you said something important, indecisive a lot, and it's telling us exactly what to do. And it tells us as we have tried this for a while, well, guess what? It's either throughout the day or throughout my 11-step experience over time. It can be both. And interestingly, I didn't hear about the results of the results. But this almost goes from instructional to promissory. So what it's saying is, listen, Bill, relax and take it easy when you get all steeped up before you open your big mouth like you always do and get in trouble. Well, then it's saying, guess what? After we've tried this for a while, we relax and take it easy. We don't struggle. Now it goes from being a directive to something that's transpired, which I guess is the results of the results. So the action produces what I'm looking for, and the sentence reads the same way, but means two different things. Same with the next 3 paragraphs, but go ahead. What used to be the hunch?
What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. And that goes back to that faith is the result of the results, right? Like when we start to have the results, when we start to see that God is working in our lives, when we start to get that inspiration and direction, like I said, it pushes us in a position that becomes automatic. You know, there's this old saying, and it's repetition never ruined the prayer. And so we keep engaging in these practices. We keep reaching out in prayer and meditation. We keep inviting God to be a part of the solution. And never once has that ever disappointed me or let me down. Sometimes it doesn't happen on my timeline because I'm impatient, like I said. But guess what? The answers always come. Being still in experience and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. I wish I was. I wish I was. I wish I was inspired all the time. I wish I was on fire all the time. I wish I felt deeply connected to my higher power all the time, but sometimes I don't. And in these moments these days, that there's like, when it talks about this automatic, you know, this working part of the mind, when I feel disconnected, first of all, I know it's something within me. And so it's at that point that I ask God, please remove from me whatever's blocking me from you, right? We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. When I'm sitting in that space where I'm waiting for the answers, If I don't have the ability to pause and ask, if I don't have the ability to keep my mouth shut, to walk away from a situation that's getting me all fired up, to keep my fingers off the keys, right? I may pay for this presumption, right? I'm not feeling inspired. God's not giving me the answers fast enough. Where is my direction? And so I take action. And I pay for this presumption and absurd actions and ideas and words and offending people and stepping on their toes, right? I'm getting right back into that hot water territory. But nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. And this is a process, right? It's not like all of a sudden on the first day that we do step 11, we are automatically inspired at all times. We automatically know to go to God. Like sometimes that's the last place that I go. But our thinking will, as time passes, as we continue, like I said, repetition never ruined the prayer. As I continue to engage in this and continue to talk to God and invite God to be a part of the solution, becomes more and more on the plane of inspiration. And I do come to rely upon it. More and more often these days, my first thought when something's not going my way or I don't know what to do, my first thought is to invite God to be a part of the solution. Sometimes I'm standing in my bathroom and I'm like, God, you got to take this. I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? It's so intuitive when I'm driving in the car. Right. It's these moments of indecision, these moments of internal stir that we sometimes encounter that I know that I cannot do this by myself. I've got to invite God to be a part of the solution. Come on in, Bill.
So it says gradual. If I go out today's crazy. I looked at the weather in real time. It's 51 degrees. I don't know what the heck I'm doing inside. But yesterday it was kind of chilly. It was snowing again. It was in the 20s. If I went out and started my car gradually, it would heat up. If I turn the heater on, as soon as I start the engine, nothing but frigid air is going to come out. It's going to make it worse than better. So it's also been said, as DC said, this happens over time. This happens daily, and then it happens over a accumulation of days. Because on awakening, like she said, I might wake up I might get startled to wake up. I might wake up and come to gradually. I might not be inspired at that moment. Someone might ask me a question. I might be short with them because I haven't brushed whatever teeth I don't have left to get rid of that overnight smell. So all of a sudden I'm bothered and I take it out. But also it says we are not going to be inspired at all times, although I want to be, which means I'm going to come up to you and tell you what God told me to tell you. And I might pay for that in all sorts of absurd actions, ideas. It might not have been God talking at all. It might have been my wishful intent. I might step out and know that God told me to do something, and I might end up making a mistake that could cost me financially or otherwise later on, because it really wasn't God's prompting. But it says, nevertheless, keep trying. Keep trying. And that Thomas Merton prayer, the fact that I want to please God maybe does in fact please God, because I don't know if I'm pleasing God. I don't know if I'm doing his will. I pretty well know when I'm not doing his will, because I get that knot in my gut and I find myself somewhere on pages 60 through 62, producing confusion, is in collision, trying to get you get it, right? You read the book, you saw the movie. Did I do that, Steve Urkel? That's it. When I say, did I do that? Third step situation. But we come to rely upon it. And our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on that new plane that God has placed our thinking into. That's a pretty big promise. How much time, and it talks about it in the 12 and 12, how much time of my day would I be willing to spend if I knew that my thinking could remain in that God conscious state that DC says she'd like to have all the time? Maybe she can, even though it says we're not going to be, at least when I'm awake. When I'm awake in my own life, why can't I be inspired all the time? I don't know. It might be on me. It's probably not on God. All right, DC, what do we do when we conclude this period of meditation? I'm interested to find out.
All right. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be. Right? And that's going back to what we just read. Show me all throughout the day. Like when I don't know what to do, show me what to do. Help guide me through this process. That we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. Like, we're human beings, we're having a human experience, right? We're going throughout our day. There's gonna be challenges throughout our day. We're gonna encounter people that rub us the wrong way, people, you know what I mean? Situations, things that I don't want to do at work, you know, when my dog pooped on the floor, whatever it is, right? Like, we're going to encounter situations throughout our day. And we are asked that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. Not so much like the things that we need to take care of such problems, but the direction, that intuitive guidance. What step, how can I show up? How should I show up? What should I say? Where should I pause? Right? That's what we're asking God for. We especially ask for freedom from self-will. Freedom from self-will. Trying to constantly align ourselves with God's will. I think I told you guys, I have an alarm that goes off on my phone every 2 hours that says, "Thy will be done," because I need that reminder every 2 hours. And when that alarm goes off every 2 hours, I pause, I take a deep breath, and I say, "Thy will be done." That's the one way that I can't ignore it, right? It's like this little every 2 hour catch-all that at some point every 2 hours, I have to be redirected to God's will. And we're careful to make no requests for ourselves only. Well, what does that mean, right? Part of my morning prayer includes praying for other people. But like I said at the very beginning of this talk, I don't get to decide what God's will is. I don't get to decide how showing up for other people is. And the same thing goes along with this praying for other people, right? I don't pray that this person gets cured of cancer. I don't pray, "Oh my gosh, please let me win the lottery," right? I'm not making any requests for myself only. Please let me get a good parking spot. Please, you know, whatever it is. I don't pray for myself only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. You know, the easiest way for that I've heard shared in other meetings is, you know, if we feel inclined, if we feel moved to make a request for ourselves, to follow it up with, "If it be thy will," right? If it's your will. And that means that it puts myself in alignment. It puts myself potentially in acceptance of whatever comes. If it comes, if the thing that I'm praying for, like if I that materializes, that's because it was God's will, not because I made this demand on God, right? And I think back to what my prayer life looked like before I got sober, and everything was transactional. "God, can you get me out of this? God, can you make this stop? God, I promise if you, please don't let those be flashing lights in the mirror," right? Whatever it is. "I promise if you do this, I'll straighten up and fly right." This takes the conditions out of the prayer life, right? We don't have conditions. This is not a transactional relationship anymore. We're placing our thought life in God's hands. "If it be thy will." We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. Many of us have wasted a lot of time doing that, and it doesn't work. You can easily see why. And that's what I just talked about, right? That transactional prayer life that I had before I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, that bargaining prayer life that I had, that condition, "If you give me this, I'll do that. I really, really need this. Can't you see that? Please don't let the car get repossessed. I really need my daughter to be taken to school," right? Here's the deal. If I pay the bills, the car doesn't get repossessed, right? I play a role in it. And so I've got to be willing to see that whatever's unfolding in my life, whatever I'm praying for, if it be thy will, aligning my will with God's, to trust that the answers to come, the rewards that come, the consequences that I face, the things that get removed from my life are exactly part of God's will. And here's the other thing I just want to say is, you know, sometimes I know we feel overwhelmed when we face consequences or we have things taken away from us, whatever it is, when things don't go our way. But God has never removed anything or anyone from my life without replacing it with something better. Sometimes we lose things because it's clearing space for something even greater to be delivered to us. And when I see those things happen, I know that that loss, that consequence, whatever it was part of God's will. It goes back to that whole thing. The faith is the result of the results. Come on in, Bill.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm gonna make a bold statement here. I really don't ask God for anything anymore. And what you guys would call prayer, and I don't say that I slack on this 11th step. I think it's what I'm starting to understand and realize is that God consciousness is what I'm seeking, to be aware of the conscious contact with the power. When the conscious contact starts to fade, it's never prayer and meditation that I'm lacking. It's inventory. What happens is I let the house get dirty again and didn't clean it. And that's hard to concept, because here's the deal. What am I going to ask God for that if he gives it to me, it might interfere with what's best for me or what he had planned? And number two, am I saying that God doesn't know what I need, that the creator, the divine, does not know what the creation needs? All my life I've done what I wanted for me, and it was always second best at the very best. and usually a lot worse than that at the very least. We sit at these meetings and doesn't matter what part of the world I live in, it's always been customary here to ask, is anyone in need of prayers? And then people start praying that God does certain things for people as if they know better than God. I'm just not that presumptuous anymore. I don't know what's better. Thy will be done. Help me to line up with thy will be done. And then, and I think if you're done with that paragraph, DC, I might read this next one because I got a couple of things I would like to say about it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind.
And you guys, I want to tell you, 2 weeks from today, with Rob's consent and his request, so you can give him the credit, we are having cake and ice cream, and we are having a catered lunch here at a Design for Living because we're celebrating our anniversary on the 17th. Please come back and bring a side dish. That does not mean a girlfriend if you are married. That means you bring something to eat as well, and we'll share with everyone. But bring someone. Bring someone with you. This is a big deal. To make a commitment and a year later have it still be going. And there's so many meetings out there. You guys know that there's so many big book studies. So please come back, tell someone about it. And here's what we don't step on anyone's toes, not even the religious folks. We don't tend to know what's better. If circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in this period of morning deliberation, thinking about our day. They're going to call that meditation, not quieting my mind and not know what's going on. I did that long enough with alcohol and drugs. I don't want my mind to be asleep no more. If we belong to a religious denomination, do what they say to do. That's your calling. That's none of our business. It's not our concern, and we're not going to trump that or override that. If it requires a morning devotion, attend to that. If you're not a member of a religious body, which now you will in AA, because some of the Supreme Courts have deemed this a religion, and if you've completely given yourself to us, then you're with us. We attend to that also. If not members, we sometimes select and memorize a few set prayers. But I make sure that I'm not saying them out of rote. Am I communicating with God and paying attention to what being communicated? If all I'm doing is saying the Serenity Prayer real quick so I can check it off my list, I think it would be better if I didn't say anything at all. Now, that's my preference, which emphasize the principles we've been discussing, which is to give me guidance, keep me out of the way, help me to be of service, loving and tolerant of others, so on and so forth. There are many helpful books also. Suggestions about these may be obtained from one's priest, minister, or rabbi. Be quick to see where religious people are right. Be quick to see where other people are right. Be quick to see what's right. My entire life as a chronic alcoholic, we find ourselves in like the Florida guy hanging in the Florida sunshine complaining about the sad state. I'm quick to see where everything's wrong. Alcoholism is chronic malcontentedness. And if I start seeing the flaws, it's letting me know that I've let up on this program of action. I get to, how does someone say it? Marilyn said it one day. She said, I'm reading my own mind. Oh my God, I'm not reading your mind like I'm clairvoyant. I'm reading my own mind. Which way am I headed? Do I walk into a room and I'm quick to see where they're wrong? Or am I quick to see where where religious people and other people are right? Do I make use of what they offer, or do I dismiss it with my obstinacy like I've done all of my life because I know better? Or it's a good idea and I know it's a good idea, but it didn't come from me, so I dismiss it. What a pathetic little mindset I used to have. Make use of what they offer. Really? That works for you? I'm going to read the next one too, all right, DC, because these are more like instructional or descriptional. Is that fair? You
Yeah.
can, did you want to say something about that paragraph now while we're in it?
No, not at all. We're getting close to the end of the page and we're getting close to the end of the meeting. So I wasn't sure if you wanted to hold space for anyone to share back this morning was my only hesitation.
You do, but since it's anniversary month, I'll stay with them till 4 o'clock when I got to speak on NKIS.
Go for it.
As we go through the day, listen, that's an operative word, through. Through. I looked that up. Maura, what the hell did that mean? We looked it up. It wasn't like I did it hourly. It's like I passed through it like it was a region or a realm. It was just interesting, but we'll get to that next week. As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. Again, that's an instruction which becomes a promise. And we ask for the right thought or action. Rather than jumping ahead, we say, hey, I need a little help here. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show. As a matter of fact, I remind myself that I was never running the show. I just thought I was. That was a delusion. Humbly saying many times throughout the day, thy will be done. Because guess what the benefit is? I'm in much less danger of the bedevilments of alcoholism dominating my life. I'm in less danger of fear, excitement, anger, danger, worry, self-pity, foolish decisions. As a matter of fact, if I'm in less danger of those things dominating me, I become much more efficient. The word efficient means in a well organized and competent way, preventing the wasteful use of a particular resource. The energy that I'm burning up when I'm trying to manage my life is another word for spirit, love, or God. I'm burning up the God consciousness within me when I'm trying to arrange life to suit myself. We do not tire, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. This works, it really does. We alcoholics are undisciplined. We become disciples here. We let God disciple us. So we let God discipline us in the simple way we have just outlined. But this is not all. This may be the last instruction of step 11, and I never read it that way. There is more action. More and more action. Faith without works is dead. The next chapter is entirely devoted to principle 12. That demonstrates that I meant what I meant when I asked in 11 for what I asked in 11. DC, close it off.
You know, here's a consideration for you. I heard, I was listening to a speaker months ago, and when we got to this part in the reading, this very beginning of what you just read, as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. Is that a direction or is that a promise? If we have followed the directions that have been laid out for step 11, if we're aligning our will with God's, if we're asking for direction when we don't feel inspired, if we're asking God to direct our thinking, if we follow all these instructions, then this becomes a promise. If we're aligned with our higher power, if we're in the groove, right? We're feeling things, then guess what? As we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and we ask. That's a promise. These are the things, those are the fruits of our labors. That is the reward for this willingness to align our will with God's. Constantly reminding ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying, right? Humbly, not begrudgingly, not demandingly, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done, right? With peace as a request, with openness, with receptiveness, thy will be done. We are then in less danger of excitement, fear, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. These are all the things that we've talked about, right? Those foolish decisions. If we're willing to pause and ask, we get the answers. If we're willing to invite God to be a part of the solution and wait for the answer, we're less likely to engage in these foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. And you know what? I'll end with this. One of my favorite lines in the entire big book is right here on page 88, because this sums up the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, a working relationship with my higher power and a willingness to do the work as it's laid out in these 164 pages. It works. It really does. Thanks so much for letting me co-host with you today, Bill. It has been a pleasure. I love all of you, and that's all I've got.